A stream of purple energy around Temptress rose into the sky. Ling Si, noticing the level of this spell, thought that she clearly had no intentions of playing nice. He thought that she seemed to have a lot of confidence in her own abilities, and she thought that whether it was him or Coco Lai, it would be an easy victory for them. Frowning, the protagonist asked about what would happen if he refused. Temptress asked back in surprise. She told him with a smile that she was offering him a way out, and if he didn't make up his mind soon, things might already be over on his companion's side. Ling Si asked if she was worried that Divine Chamber would make a sudden comeback. Temptress, laughing, said that they hadn't even earned a single point in the last round. She asked if he really thought they would come after them this round. She said that in order to save their points this time, they will probably play it safe and run away with their tails tucked just by seeing them. Temptress said that it's very simple, and the side that loses first will be the losing team, who will have to give all the parts of the key they collected to the winner and voluntarily surrender. Ling Si, frowning, thought that since their bet involved a battle at Coco Lai's place, it would involve a lot of uncertainty. He thought that it wouldn't be a problem. The protagonist grinned and told her to memorize her words. Getting into a fighting stance, he said that he just needed to defeat her before the battle on the other side was over. Temptress, putting forward her hand with a magic circle, agreed and said that she was fascinated by confident men like him. Purple energy rushed into the air at the protagonists. A purple rose image appeared above him, and Ling Si noticed the signal. Temptress, who was behind the protagonist, said that she was starting and he had better pay attention. Ling Si dodged, and Temptress hit the roof of the building. The protagonist frowned and thought about her shortening her distance, and whether it was possible that she was using a battle mage setup. Noticing the shiny pink pollen, Ling Si frowned in surprise. Temptress was using alluring pollen, and the protagonist thought about the fact that her casting speed was very fast. Temptress grinned and said that it was her special signature skill, alluring pollen. She asked him to inhale it and asked if it was sweet. Restrained status was placed on the main character, and he wondered what kind of skill it was. He wondered why there were no target indicators. Temptress happened to be next to him and asked him about the fact that he couldn't move a muscle. She told him not to worry because she will shower him with loads of love. Ling Si clenched his teeth tensely. Temptress asked if he was curious why there were no target indicators. Above her, a large sword shrouded in dark energy writhed out of the magic circle. Temptress thrust forward her hand in purple magic and told him to have another. Noticing the movement, she looked up. The knight swung his sword and Temptress dodged it, jumping back. Looking at the knight, she thought it was that thing again, and she had seen him use it last round as well. Ling Si nervously thought that this was close, and if not for the fact that all he had to do to summon the Knight of the Glorious was just to think about it, things would be very bad. Ling Si, standing behind the knight's back, told her that unless he was wrong, the skill she had just used must have been exclusive. Temptress said he was right and she was a charm mage, a special deviant mage subclass. She said he wasn't bad either, and his fighting style had caught her attention since the last round because of its uniqueness. Temptress said with a smile that when he fought the Divine Chamber people, he had 2 types of summons that totaled 3. She said that, along with his skill set, it was very interesting to watch. She asked about the fact that he was a thief but seemed to be able to use mage skills. Raising her eyebrows, Temptress said that they have a lot of top-ranked thieves in Thousand Autumns, but she had never met a thief who had a promotion bonus that gave access to mage abilities. Grinning, she said that both a thief and a mage at the same time is very interesting, and she is very curious about him. The main character surrounded by purple electricity said that she seemed to be watching him closely. Ling Si used elemental manifestation, Thunderflash, leaping towards Temptress. Temptress thought that his speed was unbelievable, and on top of it, he was dealing AoE elemental magic damage. Smirking, she thought to herself that since this thief is able to learn mage spells, is it possible that it's dual class? She told him that if she were to fight him just as a mage, it would really be difficult. Ling Si stopped, dropping to his knees. Frowning, he thought he should have realized sooner. Looking at Temptress, whose clothes had changed and who had black horns and wings, he thought she was just like Ruko and Bankafis. He thought she must be blessed. The dialogue box says, "Blessing, succubus." Her fiendish allure stirs the hearts of thousands. The guys in the crowd, staring fascinated at the screen and marveling at the beauty of Temptress, shouted that it was the same mage from Thousand Autumns. Stillwaters, fixing his glasses, thought that he still couldn't avoid the most problematic person after all. Smirking, he thought there were rumors that to this day no man had managed to escape her grasp. He thought, it looks like this time it won't just be a battle of strength. Stillwaters thought that this battle would test the strength of his character as well. Temptress stood, surrounded by purple electricity. She playfully said that only a few people get that kind of luck to see that costume of hers. Temptress asked about whether he wanted her to play with him. She said that if he would lay down his weapons, she would guarantee that he would have a good time. Ling Si, surrounded by pink pollen, frowned and thought her scent filled the air. A whip appeared in Temptress' hand. She made a comment about how if he didn't like whippings, she didn't mind letting a rascal like him do whatever he wanted to her. Temptress said with a smile, surrounded by pink pollen, that she promises to satisfy him whether he prefers to be passive or active. Ling-Si tensely looked at her whip. He said with a tense but blank stare that he preferred to be passive. Temptress, looking at him, said he was a sweet and honest little boy. She said she would give him lots of love. She thought about him being caught. Touching the protagonist's face with her hand, Temptress thought that he seemed to be just like any other man, and that was all he was capable of. She opened her eyes in surprise. Between her and the blushing Ling-Si was a knight who, with a swing of his sword, telepathically asked the protagonist to wake up. The dialogue box described glorious protection. When affected by any form of illusory or lure skills, if a glorious follower is currently active, they can forcefully dispel the effects. COOLDOWN 7 days. Temptress, looking at the knight in surprise, wondered how this was possible. Gritting her teeth, she thought about the fact that he had interrupted her illusory sense so easily. She thought about what exactly this summon of his was. Ling-Si smirked and said that he couldn't believe that he was caught off guard and fell for it. He thanked the knight and said that thanks to him, he had discovered another function of this badge of the glorious. The knight replied that he was just doing his duty. The protagonist frowned angrily, a vein swelled on his face, and he said that he could see that he was getting serious and they shouldn't waste any more time. Ling-Si said that he had wanted to fight the professionals from Thousand Autumns for a very long time. He said that he would take care of her provocative air at the same time. Temptress said with a smirk that he talks big, but he's not the first man to tell her that. She used charming doppelganger and 2 of her purple copies appeared beside her. Temptress said he would love to know what a man like him can do. The protagonist asked if she wanted to fight him with quantity. Ling-Si used Dominion of the Mercenary, Skeleton Czar, and 2 spectral warriors appeared in front of him. The spectral warriors, shrouded in blue electricity, rushed forward to attack. Temptress told him not to count on him being able to win simply by having a numerical advantage on his side. Her copies, using passionate assault, started firing pink energy from their hands. Ling-Si said, protection. Spectral warriors blocked the shot of pink energy with their swords. Temptress said, he wasted her passionate kiss. Her clones bypassed the spectral warriors from behind and darted towards the protagonist. Ling-Si saw them leaping at him to attack from both sides. A pink cloud of dust rose up. Ling-Si squeezed one eye shut and thought that this was an impressive skill combo chain, and it left him little time to react. Temptress told him that they still didn't have a chance to get up close and personal. Ling-Si used Throat Slasher and cut her in half. Gritting his teeth, he thought it was a clone. Frowning, the protagonist thought that one of the specialties of succubi was their ability to create multiple clones that appeared out of nowhere. Looking at the spectral warriors fighting, Ling-Si thought that on top of that, they had all sorts of headache-inducing skills. Frowning, he thought that he was also biding his time for the right moment. Temptress' eye sparkled in a cloud of pink dust, and she said with a smile as she walked towards him. She frowned in surprise. Noticing what Ling-Si had disappeared, he wondered if he had been able to predict when she would appear. A purple electricity enveloped her, and Temptress was surprised to think that he had actually used the fog she had created to hide herself. Ling-Si used Elemental Manifestation, Thunder Flash, and Rapid Shadow Thrust, and once he was behind his opponent's back, he said that the spell aura of Succubus was too much for him to handle. He thought it was time for his attack. Scowling and swinging his dagger, he told her to die. Temptress was right in front of his dagger. Before the protagonist's dagger reached its target, the dialogue box announced that his team had received one part of the key. Ling-Si frowned in surprise. Temptress said with a smile, good timing. Sighing, she said with a smile, it looked like their little competition was over. She said that she had lost and he had won. Temptress added that it looked like they had finished before them. She said that if they had been slower by even a second, she would have been killed by Ling-Si. The dagger in the protagonist's hand disappeared and he clucked his tongue irritably. Frowning and kneading his wrist, he said that killing her right now interested him much more than winning. Temptress said that was why she let the match end. Ling-Si asked if she did it on purpose. Temptress said that a gambler should always be willing to admit defeat. She said that since they agreed that the loser is eliminated, she would give him that part of the key. Temptress tossed part of the key to the protagonist. Her clothes returned to their original appearance, and she said that she had already figured out everything she wanted to know about anyway. She said that Thousand Autumns were leaving this round. Remembering, she asked what his name was. Temptress, sitting on the staff, said it was the first time she had ever asked a guy's name. She asked how he could take her first time so easily. Ling-Si said his name. Temptress told Ling-Si that she would remember it. As he flew away, she waved her hand and told him that he must take first place in this round or she would be disappointed. Ling-Si replied that the first place would definitely belong to him. Temptress said that she had kept her part of the key close to her heart all this time and he should keep it safe. Ling Si, blushing and looking at the key part, said that it smells nice. The guy said in surprise while looking at the screen that this thief had defeated the #1 mage from Thousand Autumns. The people in the crowd shouted that it was unbelievable. Ling Si and Temptress probably didn't expect that their mere sparring would cause such an uproar outside. People on the forum wrote, "The #1 mage of Thousand Autumns lost. I'm not sure, but it seems to me that Whitebone Temptress lost on purpose at the end. But why? Surely there's a reason for that. The way I see it, the thief is just stronger." Somehow, Ling Si's name became the main topic of all the discussions regarding the special battle. After that, the beautiful figure of Temptress conquered cover advertisements everywhere. This battle for a part of the key caused an unprecedented wave of heated arguments throughout Heavenland. An eagle flew over the ruins of the city. Ling Si, standing behind Coco Lai's back, praised her for her good work. Coco Lai abruptly turned around with a displeased expression on her face. Ling Si waved her hand with a smile. Coco Lai asked, "What's this now?" After that, Ling Si's name became known to all the players. Ling Si asked if what she just said was true. Coco Lai replied that it was a meaningless question and she had no reason to lie. Blazing with anger, she clenched her fist and said that she was very angry right now, and this person from Thousand Autumns was very cocky. Coco Lai said that she'd supposedly been marked by that swordmaster from Thousand Autumns until that signal sigil spell appeared. The opponent blocked the yellow magic arrow with his sword. A pink magical rose image appeared in the sky. The guy with blonde hair exhaled, calling Coco Lai Sister Coco of Nebulos, and said that it seems like their little sparring session ends here. Coco Lai objected and said that she didn't think they were close enough for him to call her that. Taba Zengo level 52 grinned in agreement and said that they aren't that close. His special post-promotion subclass is Swordmaster. He said that treating others with courtesy is a core value of their guild, which also gives him a headache. Coco Lai, standing in front of him with a bow in her hand, thought that she had heard Taba Zengo from Thousand Autumns say this. She thought that he is also known as Bloody Lion, and he is one of the best swordmasters. Frowning, Coco Lai thought about the fact that he's part of the first division of Thousand Autumns, and he's level 52. She thought that although she didn't want to admit it, it seems that's what it means to be the #1 guild. She thought that it seems like they are still lagging behind in terms of levels of their guild members. Taba Zengo asked if the Vice Guildmaster of Nebulous was interested in seeing his rough side. A yellow magical arrow appeared in Coco Lai's hand, and she asked if he thought she'd be scared. Taba Zengo said with a sinister smirk that the Vice Guildmaster was quite so bold and spirited. Surrounded by blue energy, he exuded killing intent. He said that then he will cut her down with the full extent of his strength. Coco Lai thought that she needed to keep her distance, and against such an opponent, one careless mistake would lead to her death from a single blow. The blue energy around Taba Zengo dissipated, and he said he was joking. Crouching down on a rock, he tiredly said that going all out was too exhausting, and he had slept too little for that. Coco Lai looked at him silently. She angrily asked if he was looking down on her. Taba Zengo, smiling nonchalantly and scratching the back of his head, said that it wasn't like that at all, and he just didn't need to do that. Smiling slightly, he thought to himself that he'd better not mess up that demoness plan. Noticing something, Coco Lai looked to the side. Taba Zengo, shifting around, said that it should be about time. With a yawn, he said that their battle shouldn't take too long. Coco Lai thought about the speed of his movement just now. She asked what he was talking about. Taba Zengo replied with a smile, "Nothing." He said that explaining would take too much effort, and it wasn't something she needed to know. He told her to kill him. Frowning, he added with a smile, "Right now." Ling Si said she obeyed. Coco Lai irritably replied that of course she did. She said that guy was acting too smug. Coco Lai said she made his head explode with an arrow without thinking. Ling Si thought that it seemed that the moment Coco Lai delivered the fatal blow, the match between him and Temptress had been decided. Coco Lai, angrily shooting into the air, shouted that it made her angry to even think about his stupid sleepy expression and that she would kill him. The protagonist frowned, thinking that it looked like she had lost on purpose. He thought he was starting to get fired up for the third round. Coco Lai, with eyes blazing with anger, asked if he was listening. She told him that the next time he sees this Taba Zengo, he should go all out and kill him. She said that this man is just asking to be killed. Ling Si, exhaling, agreed and said that he would definitely kill him. Now that the #1 guild, Thousand Autumns, was out of the game, and the #2 guild, Divine Chamber, was playing it safe, Ling Si and Coco Lai held their position in first place for the second round, with Divine Chamber taking second place right behind them. In the process, they met Student Inch once. Coco Lai, standing in front of the Divine Chamber people on the bridge, said that this is awful timing. She said with a bow in her hand that she was in a terrible mood today, and they better not waste their time with silly conversations. She told them to make their choice, fight or get out of here. The beastman in armor said that her facial expression was truly terrible. He said that they had already lost to this thief once before, and now the vice guildmaster of Nebulous was also with him. Coco Lai looked at them, frowning darkly with anger. Beastman told Student Inch that he was afraid he would be a burden to him because he wasn't good enough, and they'd better play safe and save their points. Student Inch agreed. He put up a stone wall using casualties of war and said to run. Beastman said that he didn't know that this skill of his could be used like this. Coco Lai, fiercely shooting arrows at the wall, shouted for them to die. Ling Si smiled awkwardly that evil woman is really terrifying, but it's good that things turned out like this and it saves them a lot of trouble. Knowing the importance of getting points for this round, Student Inch decided to avoid a direct confrontation. So with 126 additional keys, Nebulous received a base reward of 1,000 Torchfire and an additional reward of 12,600 Torchfire in the second round for a total of 13,600 Torchfire. Since both Thousand Autumns and Divine Chamber had once received 0 points each, Ling Si and Coco Lai took first place after Thousand Autumns had spoiled them. Currently, on the final leaderboard, Nebulous was undisputedly in the lead for coming in second place in the first round and first place in the second round. While Thousand Autumns and Divine Chamber were no longer at the top of the leaderboard, no one doubted the possibility of them climbing back up in the coming third round with their abilities. The dialogue box announced that the third round shall soon commence. The reason why everyone was so excited before the third round was because Nebulous was the center of attention. All the players in Heavenland had unprecedented expectations for this mysterious thief from Nebulous. Temptress saw on the floor in a white space. Above her head were several huge blue crystals. Taba Zengo, yawning, said that the second round was very long. He said he thought this thief would finish it quickly. Temptress asked him about the fact that being killed at the beginning should have allowed him to sleep as long as he wanted. Taba Zengo asked her about still researching. He said that he had never seen her so interested in someone else. Temptress asked if that was true. She said that she just finds him quite interesting. She added that his skill set and abilities are unlike any professional they've met before. Temptress said that he always seems to have surprises in store. With a smile, she said that in short, he is an interesting guy and Taba Zengo wouldn't understand. He raised an eyebrow with a lazy smile and asked if this Ling Si is really that strong. He said that she made him curious too. Taba Zengo said that his name isn't even on the Heavenland Thief rankings, and is it possible that they are even stronger than the top 3 top thieves? Temptress said that being in the top 3 on the Heavenland Thief rankings is really good, but not everyone does it for fame and attention. Taba Zengo frowned and said with a smile that it looked like he would have to figure it out for himself in the next round. Temptress said that makes them rivals in love. Taba Zengo countered that it doesn't interest him. Temptress told him not to rush to deny it, and maybe he doesn't know yet that he can like guys. She said they've rested enough and it's time for them to get ready for the final round. Taba Zengo frowned and said that she always treats him like a little kid and it annoys him. Temptress called him little kid and said it's almost time and they should go. Round 3 is about to begin, and the viewership of this competition has reached an all-time high. The dialogue box says 283,538 viewers, 230,000 trending. The portal is located in a round stone structure. Coco Lai and Ling Si walked out of the portal. Coco Lai exclaimed in surprise. Student Inch, coming out of the portal, told Ling Si that he was on time, and this last round was very vexing. In front of them were the teams from Thousand Autumns and Divine Chamber. Coco Lai asked if this was going to be a free-for-all. The dialogue box says all forms of combat are forbidden on this map. The third round will begin once all teams have entered. Student Inch, frowning, asked about the fact that there would be no combat in the third round. A dialogue box announced that the third round, the sword draw, would begin soon. A portal surrounded by a crowd of people glowed with blue energy. The dialogue box said, "Welcome to the third round of the special Torchfire battle, the sword draw." Team Ling Si and the other teams stood around a large stone portal. The dialogue box read, "Surely after the last 2 rounds you're all fairly exhausted. Rest assured, the round will be a test of statistics. There will be no combat whatsoever." Coco Lai asked what sort of statistics will be tested. Ling Si replied that he was not sure. A man flashed by Coco Lai who said that it was probably related to their ability, and he thought that they will be scored based on a capability test of some sort. Temptress snuggled up to Ling Si. Coco Lai, recognizing Temptress from Thousand Autumns, asked why Ling Si had gotten involved with this woman. Ling Si, blushing, replied that it was herself. Temptress, without letting him finish, said with a smile that their meeting last round was very hot, and it was practically love at first sight. She said that she was glad that Ling Si was of the passive type because she preferred to be active. Coco Lai, frowning, asked about the passive type. Closing her eyes and folding her arms on her chest, she said that such a woman would throw him away right after playing with him. She told Ling Si that he should be more savvy. Coco Lai asked if he knew what high expectations Stillwaters had for him. Exhaling, she said that after this is all over, she needs to tell Tiana to discipline her underlings more strictly. Ling Si, blushing, said that he was falsely accused. Temptress, showing her tongue, said that they don't need someone like her interfering in their relationship. The protagonist thought that this woman is a hassle. While watching Coco Lai and Temptress fight, Student Inch asked Taba Zengo if Thousand Autumns were planning a wedding alliance with Nebulous. Taba Zengo asked him not to ask him any questions regarding the woman. The dialogue box says, the rules for the sword draw are as follows. Each team will be granted 2 chances to draw out the sword that lies in the stone gate. Use your strength and skills to draw the sword out. Student Inch and Taba Zengo looked carefully at the dialogue boxes. The dialogue box said, the size of the sword drawn out by each person will vary based on the strength and method used. Coco Lai carefully read the text on the dialogue box. The dialogue box says, regardless of the size of the sword, players must hit the stone gate with the sword in their hands. There are no restrictions to the methods that can be used. Ling Si asked how a thief who has never even touched a sword before should do this. The dialogue box says, torch fire will be rewarded based on the size of the cut. The amount of torch fire rewarded represents the sword draw value. Finally, once every team has used up 2 chances to draw the sword, the torch fire obtained will serve as the result of the 3rd round. All torch fire obtained will be counted towards the total tally. There were many people standing around the stone gate. The dialogue box says, now, please line up according to the randomly assigned order issued by the system in front of the platform for the sword draw. Time allotted for each sword draw, 1 minute. Temptress, noticing the number 621 above Ling Si and Coco Lai's heads, said that it wasn't bad, and in a test like this, the later their turn, the better. Noticing that she got number 114, she grudgingly said it was annoying. Taba Zengo told her to go back. Coco Lai said that this 3rd round is pretty interesting, and it turns out they both aren't warriors. She said that the warriors here must be secretly jumping for joy. She asked if holding the swords wasn't essentially second nature to them. The warriors happily held their swords above their heads while the mages looked frustratedly at the dialogue box. Ling Si said that it wasn't necessary. He told her to read the rules again. The protagonist noticed 2 inscriptions on the dialogue box. Use your strength and skills to draw the sword out. Players must strike the stone gate with the sword in hand. There are no restrictions to the methods that can be used. He said that these 2 lines may sound straightforward, but there is a much deeper meaning behind them. Coco Lai said thoughtfully that she didn't feel that way at all. She told him to just explain it to her. Ling Si replied, use your strength and skills and no restrictions on the methods that can be used. He said that, in other words, this is not the usual draw the sword out and the players should put a lot more thought into it. He asked how they should use their skills and what they are good at to draw the sword out. Ling Si said that they would also have to think about how exactly they want to hit the stone gate. Coco Lai opened her eyes and said that she understood, and he wants to say that this is actually a test of their techniques. Temptress said that they have number 114, and that's pretty early. Smiling, he said it's sword draw, and it's up to Taba Zengo. Beastman cheerfully told Student Inch that they are both warriors, and that gives them a big advantage in the sword draw. The number 504 can be seen above their heads. He said that fortune is on their side, and this time Divine Chamber will make it to the top. He exclaimed that the first place belongs to them. Student Inch tensed up, thinking that although he was a warrior, his main angle was shields and defense, and that didn't give him much of an advantage. He thought that since they were both warriors, teammates' lack of abilities wouldn't be a burden to them this time. Opening his eyes, Student Inch thought with a serious face that they would show Nebulous and Thousand Autumns what true strength was. The dialogue box read, the sword draw begins. Team number 1, please step up. A level 39 mage in a brown hat looked nervously at the stone gate. The mage girl behind him motioned for him to go first. She asked why they were assigned to go first. The boy, frowning, shouted that it was fine and he would go first. He asked about the fact that he just needed to get it out. Shoving his hand into the blue portal, he yelled not to underestimate the mages. The guy with gray hair said he was in. The guy in the yellow hat frowned and said, that's the spirit. He told him to try harder even though he was his rival. The guy in the crowd said he's got guts, and going first is definitely not easy. Ling Si said he has the right attitude. Coco Lai said she's not tall enough and she can't see. The magician fell to his knees and said with tears on his face that it's not moving and there's no reaction at all. He said there was nothing he could do. Looking at his hand, the magician said there was really no reaction, and he managed to grab it by sticking his hand in there, but he can't seem to get it out. He apologized. A guy with gray hair in the crowd asked if that was possible, and if there was another condition they had to fulfill. The girl asked frustratedly what she could do if even he couldn't get it out. The dialogue box says, Team 1's final result, failure. The guy in the crowd said it's probably not an unfulfilled condition and they didn't meet a certain stats minimum value. Ling Si watched, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. A guy in the crowd asked if it was possible that it was a power, and then what should they, the mages, do? He said he's gonna get screwed by this round. Subsequent teams continued to fail. It wasn't until a mage from team number 15, a well-known workshop, went forth that the players were elucidated. A man in the crowd asked if they were from Mana Farmer's workshop. The guy in the blue wizard hat stuck his hand into the blue portal. The guy in the crowd exclaimed that this workshop was pretty powerful and they would see how they did. A staff appeared in the green-haired guy's hand, and he grinned and said that they were a bunch of brainless fools. He said he was going to show them how to play the game. He used Stormbringer, and a swirl of turquoise energy surrounded him. The guy yelled, "Come out." He managed to pull a large sword out of the stone gate. A guy in the crowd exclaimed that they were allowed to use skills to get the sword out. The guy with gray hair exclaimed that he understood, and it was similar to how thieves could use items like bombs to create a repulsive force. He said that, in other words, they need to be creative in using their skills. The guy with green hair said with a smirk that they should be grateful for his demonstration. Using Gravitron wind pressure, he hit the stone gate with blue energy. A dialogue box reported that he had received 3230 torchfire. The guy with gray hair smiled nervously and said that he understood, and this was the way to do it. Ling Si folded his arms on his chest and grinned, thinking that it was exactly as he thought. The guy in the yellow hat said that they mages had nothing to fear. Frowning, the protagonist thought that, in that case, he had nothing to worry about. With that burst of inspiration, the teams that followed finally obtained positive results. The competition became a spectacular display of how players of all types would draw out the sword. Meanwhile, there was very little disparity in the final scores, until that woman stepped up. Coco Lai said that they would take a good look at what that vamp would do this time. With a lick, Temptress said it was her turn. Temptress walked towards the stone gate. The guys in the crowd looking at her in fascination said it was a feast for the eyes. Coco Lai asked if he was going to watch. Ling Si, sitting on a rock and looking at the dialogue box, said no. Coco Lai asked with a smirk if it was possible that he was beaten by her somehow. Ling Si grudgingly told her to stop. Remembering his words about preferring to be passive, he blushed and thought of humiliating. He thought that he was afraid he would be at disadvantage until he knew what she was capable of. A guy with gray hair in the crowd asked how she would get the sword. Another guy said that she would probably use spells to get it by force like the mages before her had done. He asked how else a mage could do it. He added that it would definitely have to be spells. The guy told everyone to watch. Looking at Temptress, he exclaimed in surprise that she was not going to the gate. Standing at the gate, Temptress turned around with a smile. The boys asked in fascination what she was up to. Temptress, surrounded by pink pollen, licked her lips. Surrounded by pink energy, she used Captivating Melody. The dialogue box described Captivating Melody, a special succubus skill. Use a bewitching voice to mesmerize nearby units. Mesmerized units will be momentarily dazed and heed the orders of the caster. Should the mesmerized units receive any form of attack, the spell will break. Note, females are immune to this skill. The enchanted boys, blushing, were surrounded by pink notes. Temptress asked if there were any big guys who would like to help little Temptress. A guy with gray hair shouted that he would help. Another guy in the crowd yelled pick him and said that even his brains were made up of muscle. Another guy begged Temptress to pick him and mess with him. Temptress, with a wink, said that everyone was so passionate and she would thank them. Putting her hand on her belt, she told everyone to try harder. The guys rushed towards the gate, telling her to put it on them. Ling Si, closing one eye, said that he knew he wouldn't do it properly. The big guy, pulling his sword out of the portal, told Temptress not to worry, and under his guidance they wouldn't disappoint her. He asked the others if he was right. The guys lined up behind him, helping him pull the sword, agreed. Temptress said she would leave it to them and told them to try their best. Coco Lai, putting her hands on her belt, asked if it was even okay to do that. She said that she doesn't pull out the sword herself. Ling Si, closing her eyes, said that she didn't break any rules and it was smart of her. He said that she understood the words and that there were no restrictions on the methods that could be used. Looking at the sword thrust into the ground, people in the crowd shouted that it was the biggest sword they've seen so far. The big guy, kneeling tiredly, said they hadn't failed her. The other guy said he was exhausted. The big guy said he was tired. He asked how he would draw his sword later. Thanks to everyone's efforts, Temptress set a new record with a score of 8321 torchfire. This result caused a huge uproar. Following Temptress, Bloody Lion Zengo of Thousand Autumns stepped forward. Student Inch, frowning, said that Taba Zengo was one of the best players of the Swordmaster class. He said he was curious to see what he would pull out. Seeing Taba Zengo, Coco Lai clucked her tongue irritably. A guy in the crowd said that it was rare for players of that level to appear in public. Another agreed with him as well and suggested that they watch carefully to see if they could learn anything new from him. Ling Si watched silently, frowning. Taba Zengo extended his hand towards the gate. The guy with pink hair asked what he was doing. He asked if he was thinking about how he would draw his sword. Taba Zengo clucked his tongue and said he thought it would be difficult. He said he had lost interest. A guy in the crowd asked what he was talking about. Another guy asked about the fact that he said it wasn't difficult. He asked why he wasn't reaching then. Taba Zengo's hand was surrounded by yellow energy. He raised his hand upwards. Taba Zengo said with a calm face that sword and blades are all the same. He stretched his hand forward and air rushed towards his hand. The people in the top exclaimed that the current is very strong. There was a swirl of yellow energy around Taba Zengo, and a person in the crowd asked why they suddenly felt as if they were in some fantasy setting. Coco Lai asked what kind of skill it was. Ling Si said that it seemed like the rumors were true. He said that the Taba family is renowned swordsmen. The protagonist said that Taba Zengo from a young age had an exceptional affinity in all kinds of weapons, especially blades. He said that he was already recognized as the heir of the Taba family at such a young age. Ling Si said that what everyone takes delight in talking about is Taba Zengo's terrifying grasp on blades. Taba Zengo stood surrounded by yellow energy and swords. The protagonist said that there were even rumors of young Taba Zengo reaching a state of sword blade resonance after he became awakened. Coco Lai, frowning, said that he knew a lot about him. She said that she thought things like sword blade resonance only existed in cultivation novels. She said that it seemed to be a real thing now. Taba Zengo stood with a flame of yellow energy in his hand. A guy in the crowd looking at his sword shrouded in yellow energy said that it was shaking. Another guy exclaimed that he felt as if his weapon was going to be sucked in. Another guy agreed and asked what the skill was. Taba Zengo said, frowning, that to him drawing a sword is the same as drawing the blade, and vice versa. Smirking, he said that with such complexity all he had to do was use a bit of his kai on the blade, and his life blade would reveal itself. The stone gate glowed with a bright blue light. A guy in the crowd exclaimed in surprise that he didn't even need to draw, and the blade came out by itself. A huge blade appeared in Taba Zengo's hand. The guy in the crowd exclaimed that it wasn't even a sword, but a blade. He said that it was powerful enough to influence what would come out of the gate, and he really deserved his reputation as Bloody Lion Zengo. The blade ended up in Taba Zengo's hand, and as he swung it, he said that he needed more of that torch fire, for he had a mission after all. A huge cloud of dust rose above the stone gate from his blow. A dialogue box announced that 16,920 torch fire had been received. People in the crowd, looking at Taba Zengo surrounded by blue lights, said that was twice as much as Temptress had gotten. Someone said that if they added it all up, Thousand Autumns was back at the top of the Torchfire rankings. Ling Si thought that there's still so much more to Taba Zengo that has yet to be seen. He thought that he had yet to see the real meaning behind that nickname, Bloody Lion. The protagonist grinned, he thought as he looked forward to crossing swords with him. After Taba Zengo's spectacle, the rest of the players were rather dull in comparison. It wasn't until Student Inch of Divine Chamber stepped up that there was something interesting to see. With his frightening strength and the tremendous force created from his skills, he managed to score an impressive amount of 10,348 torchfire. The other warrior scored a somewhat average score of 5311, and Divine Chamber's total tally was set in stone. Following another wave of players with their variety of scores, it was the most anticipated duo's turn. Ling Si and Coco Lai stepped towards the stone gate. Nebulous Guild. The guy behind the bar said that, as expected, Thousand Autumn's abilities were terrifying as usual. The man in the wizard hat asked if he thought Nebulous could take the top spot. The guy with the dark hair said he didn't look down on Vice Guildmaster and the other guy, but this round would be tough for the duo of Archer and Thief. He said that judging by the performance of those classes previously, the outlook isn't that great. Stillwaters walked past them. The guy agreed and added that the Swordmaster from Thousand Autumns was too strong. Stillwaters thought with a calm face that Thousand Autumns was really undeniably strong, and Divine Chamber didn't send their true professionals this time. He thought that Ling Si must have realized this himself. As he opened the door, he thought that although he wasn't too concerned about the results of this competition, he wanted to see how Ling Si would handle it. The sun was shining brightly in the face of the Nebulous Guild head. Coco Lai and Ling Si stood in front of the stone gate. Coco Lai said that she would go first, and the protagonist could use this time to think about his plan. She told him to look at how she would secure Nebulous' position with a high score. Ling Si, smiling, thought that was to be expected from their tough Vice Guildmaster. The guys in the crowd shouted to Coco Lai about how tough she was, telling her to try her best. Coco Lai drew the bowstring of her bow with a yellow magic arrow. The protagonist thought about the fact that as a female professional player, Coco Lai was quite popular. Frowning, she thought that she would do as she intended. Coco Lai thought she would shoot an arrow with a strong string inside the dimension. Pushing herself off the ground, she thought she would use a summon arrow. Coco Lai shot a yellow magic arrow. She used summon arrow, might of the mammoth, and a huge stream of yellow energy hit the stone gate with force. A guy in the crowd exclaimed about it being Coco Lai on purpose, summon arrows. Coco Lai thought as she used summon arrow's strength to pull out her sword. The sword, encircled by a yellow rope, came out of the stone gate. The people in the crowd exclaimed about the sword coming out of the gate, and Coco Lai marveled. Grabbing the sword, Coco Lai thought that she would treat this sword like an arrow. Frowning, she thought, using the burst damage from her bow and arrow. Coco Lai used summon arrow, might of Mastodon, firing a sword shrouded in green energy from her bow. The sword struck the stone gate, raising a cloud of dust. Coco Lai thought she had used the strength-based skills she had. A dialogue box announced that 9621 Torchfire had been received. She said that she had done her best as an archer. Ling Si, raising his hand, said he understood. Temptress said she liked that Vice Guildmaster, and the girls are pretty good too. Taba Zengo said, putting her hands on her belt, that it was pretty good, and if she had her class, she could have gotten more points with that kick than Student Inch. Temptress said that next up is Ling Si, which she is more interested in. She said she was full of anticipation and wondered what a thief like him would do to get a sword. Coco Lai told the protagonist to give his best to earn first place for Stillwaters. Student Inch, grinning, said Ling Si better not disappoint him. The protagonist told Coco Lai not to worry, because from the moment they announced the rules for this round, he had rehearsed in his head how he would pull out the sword many times. Stillwaters asked if Ling Si would bring them another miracle. A guy in the crowd exclaimed, pointing his finger that it was that thief. He wondered how he would do, and if he could surpass 1,000 autumns. Ling Si stood in front of the stone gate. A guy in the crowd grinned and said that surpassing 1,000 autumns would be impossible. He said that the thief class had had the worst performance so far, and moreover, his opponent was the professional swordmaster, Taba Zengo. Ling Si thought that the thieves before him had tried many different methods, but all of their results were weak. With a smirk, he thought that drawing the sword was just all about momentum. Reaching out to the blue portal, the protagonist thought that since his rebirth, his goal had been to become number one, and that meant being number one in everything. With a smirk as he stuck his hand into the portal, Ling Si thought that he would make everyone look up to him with the belief in the phrase, "If I can't do it, who can?" Temptress asked in surprise if he was just going to pull out a sword like that. She said she thought he would do something special, and if he was only using his power, being a thief, she was afraid he would fail. Student Inch agreed and said that those who are not warriors lack a fundamental understanding of swords. Ling Si calmly said that it was easier than he thought. There was a sword in the main character's hand. A person in the crowd said in surprise that this sword was very ordinary, and judging from the size, but it didn't look stronger than the ones the other thieves had gotten. The guy with dark hair said it was a disappointment, and he thought he was some secret professional from Nebulous. Taba Zengo said, yawning, that if this was really the sword he was going to use, there wasn't much to see here. Temptress said frustratedly that this thing was too small. Student Inch, exhaling, said that he couldn't believe he had expectations for it. Coco Lai frowned and raised an eyebrow. Ling Si held a sword in his hand, and someone in the crowd laughed, asking if this sword was too weak. The protagonist smiled and said that even he couldn't look at it anymore. He thrust the sword into the portal with a smirk, saying that he would send it back to the furnace to be remade. The sword stabbed into the portal enveloped in red energy. The guy with gray hair exclaimed in surprise about shoving it back in. The other guy asked in surprise about doing that. The guy with gray hair asked what this thief was up to this time. Ling Si noticed a knight behind him who told him that as far as he knew, there was only one sword that suited him. The knight said that his command had been received, and not only them, but this world itself had heard his call and would give him strength. Ling Si, frowning, saw the badge of the glorious appear in front of him. Temptress, noticing the sudden gust of wind, asked what was going on. Ling Si was surrounded by a vortex of red energy. Frowning, he thought about feeling something like a tree trunk. The protagonist thought that it was too heavy. Taba Zengo exclaimed in surprise and thought about the sword aura of the sword he was pulling out. He thought that such terrifying power could only be obtained when the sword's rank reached terrifying heights. He thought as he pulls out. The knight standing behind Ling Si told him that it was the ultra greatsword with which the ruler of mankind, Casfado, had conquered the world. The protagonist, pulling out a huge sword, said with a smirk that he didn't care what it was. He tensely said with a smirk that he would pull it out anyway. Along with the sword, a stream of red energy came out of the stone gate. Ling Si raised the huge sword heavensward above him. Casfado, the human race's capital. It's named after the very ruler who led the human race to conquer the vast lands they own today. It's a colorful piece of Heavenland's history that's so long back in the past that only a few who have taken an active interest in the lore know about. Back then, with his trusty greatsword, Heavensward, the mighty Casfado the Great, who was like an expansive mountain range, was the human race's strongest power. In an epoch-making gesture, that massive figure was an existence that was akin to God. Later, Casfado the Great was dubbed the Giant King, and the Great Sword, Heavensward, became the symbol of the ruler. Being in the presence of the sword is as good as being in the presence of the emperor, and all orders are to be obeyed. The moment Ling Si drew the great sword, the bustling streets of the human capital began to undergo changes. A guy in the crowd asked what happened to the NPCs and if there was something in the sky. The NPC knights looked up into the sky. Another guy exclaimed in surprise that the NPCs were all kneeling. A guy with gray hair asked in surprise what he got. Another guy asked why he could replace the sword and if it wasn't fair. The guy with gray hair said he was just a thief. He asked how he pulls out this sword with so much more momentum than all the other classes. A huge purple spirit could be seen behind Ling Si, who was holding a huge sword in his hand. Taba Zengo asked what it was. Temptress, while adjusting her hat, asked if it was too over the top. Ling Si calmly opened his eyes. A multitude of dialogue boxes read, Badge of the Glorious Mission Update. QUESTLINE, A King's Journey, is now open. Congratulations on igniting the soul of the Giant King. You are one step closer to the status of the Glorious One. You will be granted a series of rewards. Discover the effects of these rewards for yourself in the course of the game. Please continue to search for clues in the Guardians of the Past. Your path to glory continues. Current number of guarding followers, 1, Knight of the Glorious. Progression to unlocking the Badge of the Glorious, 30%. Congratulations on obtaining the hidden title, the Crownless King. Your prestige among the human race has been immensely enhanced. Congratulations on obtaining the summon-type weapon, Greatsword Heavensward, the Heavensward exclusive skill, Earth-Shatterer, the permanent passive skill, Blessing of the Giant King, the active skill, the King's Majesty. Ling Si frowned, thinking that it looked like he had accidentally triggered something somehow, but it helped him a lot. A guy in the crowd exclaimed that Greatsword was lifting in the air, and it looked like something was lifting him up. The protagonist turned around towards the purple spirit that was raising the sword. The purple spirit was holding a sword shrouded in purple electricity in his hand. Ling Si thought that he felt like he was able to control this sword. Taba Zengo said that he couldn't believe it, and someone is actually capable of reaching man sword resonance of this level. Gritting his teeth, thinking about what kind of opponent Ling Si would be, he thought that it was simply marvelous. Man sword resonance and man blade resonance refers to the highest level of mastery for those who walk the path of the sword and blade in the real world. It's a mental state that occurs when man and weapon reach a certain level of tacit understanding. Holding the red energy sword in his hand, the protagonist thought he wanted to see what this big guy could do. The purple spirit raised up a huge sword. Ling Si swung the red sword. He struck the stone gate with force. The gate cracked from the impact of the red energy. The purple spirit sliced the gate in half. The flow of wind and stones knocked people off their feet, and a guy asked if it was an earthquake. Looking at the bright light from the bright screen, a guy in the crowd asked what was happening. He said the light from the impact covered the entire lens of the camera. Another guy asked if the director couldn't just switch to the camera from a different angle. Looking at the screen in surprise, the guy said an image started to appear. He exclaimed in surprise that he had cleaved the stone gate into pieces. Coco Lai opened her mouth in shock. Student Inch asked about the gate disappearing. Beastman, pointing his finger, shouted about the entire area disappeared. People stood around the destroyed stone gate. Ling Si, standing right in the dissipating dust cloud, said that this sword gives a pretty satisfying swing. Smiling, he decided to look at his score. Coco Lai, trembling, looked at the dialogue box that said his score was 0. The dialogue box reported that since the stone gate had been destroyed, the score had been cancelled and 0 torchfire had been received. Coco Lai, flaming with anger, clenched her fist behind Ling Si's back. The protagonist awkwardly smirked. The knight told him that it looked like he had hit too hard. Shooting a bow at Ling Si, Coco Lai furiously asked about how she didn't know where he got that ultra-flashy Manhwa skill from, but how they were going to play if would break the infrastructure of the game. Taba Zengo and Temptress said in one voice that this thief is amazing. The dialogue box says, as the stone gate has been destroyed, the game is currently running repairs. Teams who have yet to go, please patiently wait for the stone gate to be restored. Temptress, looking at the dialogue box, said that Ling Si really broke the game just like that. The dialogue box thanked the players for their patience. Temptress exclaimed about how cute he was. Coco Lai shouted for Ling Si to come back to see how he would explain it all to the guild head. The protagonist, frowning, thought that this was an outcome he hadn't expected either. He was surprised to notice Temptress in front of him. Hugging him from behind, she said that he was a lot of fun to be with. Taba Zengo said with a smirk that Ling Si was indeed full of surprises. The main character demanded to be let go. Student Inch said that he was already scared, and he's glad it gave 0 points. Beastman exhaled and said that Divine Chamber wouldn't look that bad. He thanked Ling Si, saying that he was a really good guy. And so, Ling Si, who everyone has their eye on, ended the competition with a gaffe like that. In the list of popular topics, all the topics were related to Ling Si. In the end, Nebulous ranked 6th place in this competition. As for Ling Si, he was able to escape the angry Coco Lai who wanted to drag him back to Nebulous after the competition ended. Coco Lai, flaming with anger, slapped the table and said that he had slipped away from her without a trace. Stillwaters, trying to calm her down, said that he really didn't seem to be used to this kind of competition. He said he himself was probably ashamed of what happened in the last round. Folding her hands in front of her, Stillwaters asked her about what she has now convinced herself. He asked if she now felt that Ling Si was the better choice. Coco Lai asked why he was suddenly asking that. She thoughtfully replied that she had initially thought that someone as unpredictable as Ling Si wasn't suitable for the role of guild leader because, in the end, she felt that an adult and cautious person like Stillwaters was a better fit. Stillwaters said he was a little relieved that she had praised him out of the blue. He added that it was rare. Coco Lai looked at him and said that perhaps a person as unpredictable as Ling Si is exactly the kind of person who will have limitless potential. She said that she would support his decision, but it seems that he is not ready yet. Stillwaters replied with a smile that it's not a problem and he'll just wait for him to talk to him about it himself. She said that she was sure it wouldn't take long. Ling Si, looking at the dialogue box, thought that there was no good in attracting so much attention, and he wouldn't be able to return to the guild anytime soon. He thought that it should be fine with Stillwaters. Smirking, the protagonist thought about the fact that he still needed to try out these newfound skills, and while he was looking forward to it, he would have to wait for the next time because it was time for him to leave the game. The dialogue box announced that he had received a new message from Ruko. Ling Si thought that he probably wants to ask about that last /2. He opened his eyes in surprise. The message from Ruko had said that Tilly seemed to have disappeared somewhere. Ling Si, standing in the alleyway, thought about the fact that Tilly's was missing. He looked at the dialogue box, reading the message from Ruko. A few days ago, she suddenly told us she had something to take care of that night so she wasn't able to run dungeons with us. I didn't ask Tilly's what happened, but she told me she had to handle something personal and that it wouldn't take too much time. She also said she would message us the next day, but I haven't received any news from her in the past few days. Judging by her status, she hasn't been online for a while either. This isn't like her, so I decided to tell you. The protagonist thought about the fact that she had left to deal with something personal a few days ago and hadn't been online since. He figured what's there to worry about, and Ruko is just making a mountain out of molehill. He figured she must be dealing with something tricky in real life. Closing his eyes, Ling Si thought about a few days ago. Remembering the martial mage girl he had fought with recently, he opened his eyes abruptly. He thought that there were indeed some similarities between her and the martial mage girl. Frowning in surprise, Ling Si wondered if this battle mage was really Tilly's. Real world. People are sitting on the floor around a fire. One person said that the weather had gotten colder. Another said that he had heard that a typhoon was coming. He asked if this shabby building was really going to be okay. Dr. Weird said he couldn't believe that they let them go after locking them up for 2 days and they were all back here again. Electro Thor said that they had nowhere else to go anyway, and Sis was the one who brought them here. Dr. Weird turned around, hearing a voice that said that they were indeed all still here. The main character pinned Dr. Weird against the wall, grabbing him by the collar. Dr. Weird asked about what he wanted to know the game ID of their big sis. Ling Si, frowning, said, "All right." He asked what's her in-game ID. The rest of the Neo Avengers members were lying on the ground. The protagonist, gritting his teeth, thought about the fact that once he knew this, he would be able to check if it was Tilly's or not. Ling Si stood in front of the Neo Avengers sitting around the campfire. The bulk said that she had never told them about it, and they had only recognized her through a coincidence of many circumstances. Dr. Weird, remembering the face of the battle mage girl, said that back then they were all going to get together and go to the military base together for the assessment for the Awakened. He said that back then they met her on the way, and although she was younger than them, her sense of duty touched them. Captain Superbia agreed and said that she was the reason they had decided to side with the rebels. Frowning, he said that he still remembered the words she had said, "We Awakened are the world's hope for the future. How can they segregate us by our levels just like that? There's no way I'd stoop to being a dog for the military." He said she wanted a just and fair world, a world of love and peace. Dr. Weird said she wanted to rally the rejected Awakened to rebel against the despicable acts of the government. Captain Superbia said that at night, when things went down, she even said something about not wanting to leave her comrades in the game hanging, because she only told them the excuse that she was busy with personal matters. He said he never would have thought something like this would happen to someone with such a strong sense of justice who values her friends so much. He added that he never would have thought the military would do such a thing. Ling Si frowned and thought that this was exactly the same thing Ruko had told him. He nervously said that perhaps she really was too naive. Remembering himself from his past life, beaten and tired, the main character said that in the human race there would always be self-interest, personal gain, temptations, schemes, and similar things within all large groups. Lowering his gaze, he said that even if there was no group that categorizes people, the human heart is very complicated. Ling Si said that there will always be those who target people who are weaker than them, and there will always be those who stump the weak. He said that this reality, along with the evolution of their thoughts over time, will one day still turn into a caste system. The protagonist said that, thus, the fair and just world their big sis spoke of could not exist. The Neo-Avengers quietly listened to the protagonist. Ling Si, frowning, asked about how honesty and justice had always been something that humans obtained through force. He asked if that wasn't what they were doing themselves. White Widow said he spoke beautifully. She asked what about him, a man with more power than their big sis, who sells himself to the military in exchange for his version of fairness. She asked what gives him the right to send their big sis to the guillotine. White Widow asked if it's because his power is greater than theirs, and if he's allowed to decide their fate simply because his level is higher than theirs. She asked how he was different from these tyrannical dictators, using what he calls power to decide who lives and who dies. Ling Si looked at her in silence. White Widow said that everyone present there awakened who wanted to join the army, but they met Big Sis who helped them realize that fairness is not something to be obtained through force alone. Captain Superbia said that this is the reason the Neo-Avengers were created, and they will tell the world that the force created by Heavenland is not the New World Order. Dr. Weird told the main character that he may have been strong, but he's still too green. White Widow said that if he came here because he felt sorry and wanted to do something, she had one thing to say to him. She said that Big Sis once told her that her family home was at a certain dojo. The protagonist was standing in front of a building with a sign that said, "The School of Swiftness and Strength." Ling Si said that it must be here. He asked if all the dojo are not doing well anymore. He said the doors are tightly shut even though it is still daytime. Frowning, he thought that the dojo explained Tilly's talent in close combat. Ling Si thought, if this battle mage is indeed Tilly's, then what is he to do? He thought that maybe the words of those 5 people made sense. Knocking on the door, he thought that he should make sure of her identity first. A man with brown hair gathered into a ponytail opened the door and asked who he was looking for. Ling Si said hello and asked if there was someone in this dojo called Tilly's in Heavenland. The man asked if he could find out who he was. The protagonist, unsure, said he was a friend. He thought to himself that they could probably be considered friends. The man told him to enter in that case. Ling Si walked inside and thought about how this place looked expensive, and a similar style would cost a fortune right now. The man, remembering something, asked what he was thinking about. He asked Ling Si with a grim face about what he said about being a friend of Tilly's. The protagonist replied that it didn't matter and they met in the game. The man asked how he knew about this place and if she told him about it in the game. Ling Si hesitated to answer. The man swung around and said he was lying. He told him to identify himself. He asked what his goal was for infiltrating their school of swiftness and strength. Ling Si, dodging, asked what he had in mind. The man said he wasn't bad. He said Milady wouldn't have revealed such information in the game. Ling Si, noticing how he called her, said that she really lives here. Covering his mouth with his hands, the man said that he blabbed and it was none of his business. The protagonist thought that it seems that Tilly's really does live here. The man, shrouded in yellow energy, gritted his teeth and demanded that Ling Si identify himself. Getting into a fighting stance, he demanded that he tell him the truth. The protagonist frowned, thinking that this was indeed the stance of a person skilled in martial arts. The man quickly shortened the distance and swung his leg to attack. Ling Si blocked the kick. The man, as he continued throwing punches, demanded that he tell him the truth. The protagonist told him that he had already told him that they were friends. He asked him not to misunderstand him. The man, noticing his quick movements, thought that he even used one hand to take the blow he delivered with his awakened powers. The voice told Quan that it was enough. Quan turned around and obeyed the milady. Ling Si opened his eyes in surprise, noticing the way he had called her. He glanced at the person standing in the doorway of the building. The protagonist looked forward in surprise, exclaiming that it was Tilly's in the real world. A girl in jeans and a red and white sweater over a black top with gray hair said the man was a friend of hers. Frowning, she suggested that Ling Si talk in her room. The protagonist exhaled and thought to herself that luckily she wasn't that battle mage. Ling Si looked around herself in surprise. There were many plush toys in the room, and he wondered to Tilly's if this was really her room. Sitting on the pink computer chair, she said that it was. She asked, "What about it?" Ling Si awkwardly replied, "Nothing." He thought that the Tilly's he knows in the game is a cool person who never reveals her personal information, and he never would have thought that her room in real life would contrast so much with her image in the game. Looking at her bed, the protagonist thought about the plush toys even on the bed, and whether all girls like to hug plush toys when they sleep. Tilly's, sitting at the computer, said he had white hair, just like his in-game avatar. She asked how he found this place. Langxi imagined Tilly's sleeping with a large teddy bear. Blushing, he smiled slightly and thought it wasn't a bad image. He said it was a long story, and he had managed to find the place with the help of a few marvelous individuals. Tilly's turned around and asked about the marvelous individuals. The protagonist said that he had gotten a mission some time ago, and he ended up helping the military capture a girl battle mage, who's an awakened. Tilly's opened her eyes in surprise. Langxi said that some information matched her description and he was worried that it would turn out to be her, but luckily it wasn't her, otherwise he wouldn't have known what to do. Tilly's said that even though it wasn't her, she was still frustrated and they didn't expect him to do it. He said that the person who's been captured is her older sister. Langxi, looking at the laptop screen with the image of Tilly's older sister on the news, surprised, exclaimed that it can't be. Tilly said that her sister's name is Jia Ai and she ran away from home 3 years ago. Langxi asked her to wait because he was still processing this information. Tilly's, frowning, said that her sister has always been a person with strong opinions, so falling out with family was only a matter of time. They said that even though she had left 3 years ago, they had always kept in touch with each other. The protagonist asked about what happened that made her to fall out with their family. Tilly said that, being a martial arts family, their family, the school of swiftness and strength, had always cooperated with the military. She said that, simply put, their family supplied the military with martial arts coaching and related support, and they even sent members to help with particularly dangerous missions. Frowning, Tilly said that in return their family gets generous privileges and protection, and they can even use their connections to get the workshop to make things go right for them in Heavenland. She said, however, that this was certainly unacceptable for someone who valued justice and freedom like her older sister, and she ended up having a huge fight with their father about the topic and leaving the family. She said that she received news of her sister's arrest from their family members right after it happened, but it seems that her father is not going to do anything about it. Langxi, silently listening to her, thought that although he had heard about the terrible thing that happened to Tilly's workshop in his past life, he didn't think that the situation in her family in real life would also be so difficult, and this incident might take place in the future in this life too. Tilly's gritted her teeth and clenched her fist, said that her father was probably going to abandon her elder sister. The protagonist, frowning, thought that was cruel, and he was probably thinking about family privilege and their relationship with the military. Tilly's, tapping keys on her laptop, said she wouldn't leave her and she was a good big sister to her. She said that all this time she has been trying to get to the place where they are holding her sister, but the guards are too tight, and anyway, she was able to get 3-dimensional drawings of 3 buildings nearby. Langxi worriedly said, "Don't tell me you're thinking about." Tilly's, interrupting him, resolutely said that she was going to turn these places upside down and save her sister. Langxi, exhaling, thought that was very much like her. He asked her about what she knew, that the security was tight, and how she was going to do it. He said that if they caught her, her entire family would be implicated. Tilly's told the protagonist not to act like it was none of his business. She said she still remembered what he had just told her, and his sister was caught because of her. Langxi tensely remained silent. Tilly's frowned and said that was why he should take responsibility for what happens to her. The protagonist thought that he couldn't escape from that. Tilly's said she knew how dangerous it was. Turning to Langxi, she asked him to help her and go along with her to save her sister. She said that she didn't deserve to die for the ideals she was striving for. Langxi said she didn't understand since he was the one who accomplished the task. He said that it would be problematic if a man in his position helped her, and if he was caught, he would have to face unimaginable consequences. The protagonist frowned, thinking that he couldn't bring the old man into this. Tilly said simply, smirking, she said he just needed to not get caught. She said that with what they were capable of, they definitely wouldn't get caught, and it would be just like the game. Tilly's asked about if that was what Shadow was famous for, or if he, the captain, doubted their abilities. Langxi tensely pressed his lips together. Remembering himself from the game, he thought that he really always felt restricted when he returned to the real world. He thought that in this life, he was awakened with a 100% awakening rate, and he had the strength to make his decisions this time. Remembering New Avengers, the protagonist thought that what she did really didn't deserve to die. He thought, what a drag. Langxi, gritting his teeth, thought he must do what he has to do. Placing his hand on the back of the chair, he said with a smirk that they would do as they said and save her sister without getting caught. Tilly said with a smirk that it was Langxi who she knows from the game. Langxi said he needs her to distract the guards and he can get her out on his own. He said he has to promise him one thing after they save her sister. Tilly said to get her out first and they would talk about that later. Security guards patrolled around the barbed wire building. Langxi and Tilly's were standing on a rock. Tilly's asked how he was going to infiltrate. Langxi told her to look at those high walls around the compound. He asked if she was sure they could infiltrate. The protagonist started to put on his hood and Tilly's pulled the black mask over his face. Ling Si said with a smirk that since she would distract the guards to herself, he could strike them directly with violence. The protagonist jumped over the barbed wire wall. Once behind the guards, he swung his purple daggers. Tilly struck the guard on the watchtower with his staff. Ling Si said over the phone that he took care of the CCTV camera and the 2 guards outside. He asked if she had finished mopping up the observation tower. Tilly's raised her staff upwards. The protagonist told her to watch out for the security cameras and not to show her face. Tilly's told him not to worry and that everything was fine. The guard, looking at the monitors, said that there seemed to be something wrong with the CCTV cameras. He offered to send someone out to check them. The other guard turned around. Ling Si behind them swung a purple dagger and said over the phone that he would be securing the monitor room, and she should find her sister as quickly as possible.